Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back to an age when dental hygiene was more of a vague suggestion than a daily habit. Picture it, London, late 1800s. The streets are damp, horses are clopping through coal soot, and inside a flickering gaslit home, you're standing at a chipped wash basin, holding a crust of burnt bread, not to eat, but to scrub your teeth. That's right, tonight's sleep story is about how Victorian folks cleaned their teeth with burnt crumbs. Among other charming materials like chalk, soot, and sometimes straight-up lard. It's a journey full of bad breath, questionable science, and tooth powder containers that look suspiciously like spice tins. And yes, you probably won't survive this in one piece if you're squeamish about oral care. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere unusual, or even just your couch, let me know your location and local time down in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're trudging across uneven cobblestones toward your rented lodging, a narrow upstairs room that smells vaguely of cabbage and damp socks. As you step inside and remove your boots with a sleepy grunt, there it is, your nightly dental companion, a crust of burnt bread on a chipped saucer, sitting next to an old spoon and a pitcher of cloudy water. No toothbrush, no mint, just a hunk of carbonized crumbs and some good intentions. See, in Victorian times, the idea of oral hygiene was beginning to blossom, but oh, how it fumbled. There was no Colgate, no floss, no fresh peppermint swirl. Most people didn't even brush every day, and when they did, it often involved homemade scrubs made from whatever abrasive material they had on hand. That could mean crushed chalk, powdered brick, or yes, burnt bread crusts. Burnt bread had one thing going for it: texture. The char provided a gritty, scrubby effect, perfect for removing the visible gunk from your teeth. You'd crumble it up, maybe mix it with a bit of water or vinegar, and rub it across your teeth using your finger, a cloth, or a rudimentary brush made of animal hair and a stick. It was essentially the dental version of sandpapering a window. Gentle, it was not. And the smell, well, imagine the scent of something scorched, then left out for a few days in a damp kitchen. Now mix that with morning breath. You get the picture. Historians still argue whether this method actually helped prevent decay or just scraped away enamel faster than it could grow back. Some say the abrasiveness may have removed surface stains. Others think it was just Victorian optimism, scrub hard and hope for the best. Of course, this method didn't appear in isolation. The Victorian era was a transitional time in dental history. For the first time, dentists were becoming a thing, though not always the trained, white-coated kind we imagine today. Many were former barbers, blacksmiths, or just particularly brave individuals with pliers and ambition. And regular folks, they did what they could. You, for example, finish grinding the bread crust in your saucer and lean over the basin. The cool water smells faintly of iron and algae. You dip your cloth in, then swirl it in the bread crumbs. A few crunches later, your teeth feel, well, not clean exactly, but certainly scrubbed, like you've been chewing on gravel for an hour. The gritty residue gets everywhere, between teeth, under gums, in the corners of your mouth. You spit and rinse, but some of it stays behind. Welcome to Victorian freshness. There's something endearing about it, though, in a world without Instagram dentists or 5-step morning routines. This ritual was honest, humble, and oddly satisfying in its simplicity. You didn't need anything fancy, just bread, fire, and commitment. And sometimes, you'd even reuse the same cloth for days, shared with family members. Naturally, hygiene was a group project. One cloth, Multiple mouths. It builds character, right? You settle onto your straw mattress with a tooth still crunching faintly under your tongue. A gentle breeze rattles the single-pane window. And somewhere downstairs, someone is loudly coughing in the darkness. The night smells like coal smoke and boiled cabbage. Despite the rudimentary tools and questionable methods, you take a bit of pride in your nightly dental grind. It might not earn a gold star from modern hygienists, but it's more than your neighbor Mrs. Fletcher does, and she's got teeth like broken piano keys. One mainstream fact is that during the Victorian era, dental care began to shift from a purely home-based folk practice to a more organized, professionalized service. Dental colleges opened in the mid-1800s, and by the late 19th century, dental surgery became a term people feared almost as much as enjoyed mocking. But for the average person, dentists were expensive, and toothbrushes were often a luxury item. Most did what you're doing now: improvised care, homemade remedies, and a strong stomach. Here's your fringe fact for tonight. Some people even mixed soot from chimney ashes into their brushing paste, believing the black would whiten teeth. It's unclear whether they just liked irony or actually thought color theory applied to dentistry. And while modern science frowns on the idea, it turns out that charcoal, a descendant of those burnt crumbs, has made a comeback. You've probably seen fancy charcoal toothpaste at some point, promising ultra-whitening power. It's all come full circle. Burnt bread 2.0. As your eyes grow heavier, and the embers in the fireplace glow low, you realize something. Victorian dental care might have been abrasive, inconsistent, and oddly carb-forward, but it had heart. People tried. They wanted to do right by their teeth, even if that meant chewing on carbon for 10 minutes before bed. You feel the last burnt crumb dissolve on your tongue like a sleepy, gritty whisper. Welcome to the age of crusty smiles and carbon scrubs. You wake to a sliver of dawn sneaking through the curtains, the kind that manages to highlight every speck of coal dust in the air. Your jaw aches faintly, not from a toothache, per se, but from the consistent wear of nightly bread crumb exfoliation. You sit up and stretch, and your hand instinctively brushes the nightstand, knocking over the saucer of crumbs. It scatters like ash onto the floorboards. No matter, there'll be more toast tonight. As you wash your face in the same chipped basin from the night before, the water still smells vaguely metallic. You glance toward the fireplace and consider whether today's breakfast toast will double as your evening dental kit. 2 birds, 1 crust. Now, let's talk about how this whole burnt toast method became a thing. You're not the only one crunching carbon into your smile. Throughout Victorian England, and even in parts of the US, people were improvising dental routines with what they had. And what they had was usually the leftovers, the sooty bits, the burnt edges. Bread, a staple in nearly every household, was cheap, plentiful, and came with the bonus of crusts. Overcooked crusts became even better. You'd dry them further, grind them up, and store them in little tins or even old snuff boxes. Fancy storage wasn't necessary, just dry and crumbly enough to do the job. Why did people believe this worked? Well, the logic wasn't entirely off. Abrasives did clean surfaces, and the blackened edges of bread were rough, porous, and good at lifting away plaque, if you could even call it plaque back then. It was more like a mystery coating of yesterday's stew and several unbrushed evenings. Plus, Victorians were big believers in household wisdom. If your grandmother said burnt bread cleaned teeth, then by golly, it cleaned teeth. No need for dental journals when you had generational grit, and maybe a little superstition for flavor. Historians still argue whether this method had real hygienic benefits or if it simply created the illusion of cleaning. After all, a good scrub can make things feel cleaner, even if bacteria's still throwing a party between your molars. Some even suggest that this method might have caused more harm than good, slowly grinding away enamel and leaving teeth sensitive and exposed. But the technique spread, particularly among the working class, where dental visits were as rare as indoor plumbing. You'd hear someone at the local market talk about how their uncle kept all his teeth into his 60s just by using burnt barley bread and elbow grease. That was practically a miracle. People listened. And it wasn't just about bread. Sometimes, you'd blend in powdered charcoal or soot scraped directly from the inside of a cooking pot. This wasn't considered odd, just frugal. After all, if soot could polish a fireplace, why not your incisors? Here's a quirky tidbit to chew on. Some folks believe the black crumbs helped draw out the humours from bad teeth. Yes, humours. Those mysterious bodily fluids from medieval medicine that Victorian logic hadn't quite shaken off yet. If your gums were red and swollen, it was probably your body's fire humour acting up. Burnt bread to the rescue. Balance the fire with more fire. Makes sense, right? You lace up your boots and step out onto the street, where chimney smoke curls into the pale morning sky. The air tastes faintly of ash, as if the whole city is sharing in your dental choices. You nod at your neighbor, who's tossing scraps to pigeons while chewing loudly on something suspiciously black and crusty. Solidarity. It's worth noting that commercial toothpaste did exist in Victorian times, but it was pricey and mostly targeted at the wealthy. For the common worker, it was all about DIY. In fact, some resourceful folks made and sold homemade tooth powders at market stalls. You'd see little paper packets labeled tooth dust, finest chalk and burnt rye. A penny a pouch. These were often cut with other materials, crushed brick, oyster shells, even bone dust, and yes, sometimes crushed china. You could be brushing your teeth with your grandmother's old tea set. How quaint. Some enterprising vendors claimed their tooth dust cured more than just dirty mouths. Eliminates gum rot, removes curses, and strengthens constitution. One ad bragged. A bold pitch, considering the product probably made your gums bleed from day one. You pass a vendor shouting about his miracle crumb-based dental tonic. And for a second, you're tempted. It comes in a bottle wrapped in newspaper, smells like turpentine, and boasts a hand-drawn label of a man smiling with 8 shiny teeth. That's the Victorian version of influencer marketing. Now imagine brushing your teeth, then sipping a breakfast of beef tea and boiled onions. That was your average Victorian start to the day. It explains a lot about breath management strategies. Toothpaste? Nope. Just a deep hope that nobody would get too close. Of course, some people did start using early toothbrushes, but they were crude, animal bone handles, coarse boar bristles, and the unsettling tendency to shed into your mouth. They weren't cheap either, so most folks just stuck to the trusty bread and rub combo. Later, in the 19th century, dental manuals began recommending brushing with a burnt toast crumb and vinegar slurry. Fancy. If you were really forward-thinking, you'd mix in salt or lemon juice. Not for flavor, mind you, just more abrasion, more grit, more chance to feel like you were doing something productive. And here's your mainstream historical fact. In 1859, the American Dental Association was founded. Across the pond, dental societies were starting to crop up too, as tooth science began slowly marching toward respectability. But while the professionals were organizing, the masses were still rubbing scorched toast on their gums. As the morning wears on, and the smells of coal smoke and stewed parsnips begin to mingle, you feel oddly reassured, because while today's methods might be flashier, Bluetooth toothbrushes, minty fresh foams, ultrasonic whiteners, there's something almost meditative about the simplicity of Victorian crumb cleaning. A little burnt toast, a little hope, and maybe, just maybe, slightly less morning breath. You trudge home in the early dusk. The sky stained with that murky Victorian orange-grey that hints at fog. Coal smoke, and the faint despair of a city with more chimneys than dreams. Your coat smells like soot. Your breath probably does too, though not from lack of effort. You've got your evening dental ritual on your mind. But tonight, you're trying something a little different. A new blend. Word in the alley says ash is the way forward. Ashes. Just the word makes your tongue feel dry. And yet here you are, standing by your tiny stove, carefully collecting a scoop of wood ash from beneath the grate. You're told it's clean ash. Whatever that means. It's light, fluffy, and looks like something that should stay on the floor. Instead, it's going in your mouth. Victorians had a peculiar fondness for multi-purpose materials, and ash was a favorite. It was cheap, free, in fact, and believed to have natural cleansing properties. You mix a spoonful of it with a bit of water in an old teacup and stir it into a chalky slurry. Congratulations, you've just made one of the most common tooth cleaning pastes of the 19th century. Why ash? Well, in the defense, it's alkaline. That means it neutralizes acid. And since acid is what erodes enamel and rots teeth, using alkaline ash made some scientific sense, even if nobody really had the terminology for it yet. They just knew it seemed to help. Or at least it didn't make things worse. You lift the slurry to your lips with your rag-wrapped finger. And the moment it touches your tongue, you gag slightly. It tastes like licking a fireplace. Bitter, powdery, faintly metallic. But you press on, rubbing it into your teeth with the same determination Victorian society had for crinolines and cholera. In fact, combining ash with chalk was a particularly popular combo. Chalk was mined and sold in small lumps, sometimes even flavored with lemon or peppermint for those willing to pay a premium. Together, chalk and ash made a gritty, alkaline mixture that could scrape and polish at the same time. Historians still argue whether this combo actually helped preserve teeth or simply delayed the inevitable. Some believe the abrasiveness helped remove harmful plaque. Others say the constant scraping led to enamel loss and painful sensitivity. Probably both. Balance, as always, is an illusion. Now here's the real kicker. Some households didn't stop at ash and chalk. They added salt to the mix, because obviously what your irritated gums need is a saline exfoliation session. Salt was believed to disinfect and toughen the gums. If your mouth bled during brushing, that was a good thing. It meant it was working. In today's terms, that's the equivalent of being told your shampoo is effective because it makes your scalp bleed. You glance at the cup and consider adding more water, but you decide to stay traditional. The Victorians wouldn't have watered it down. They embraced the burn, and it does burn, especially if you've got any tiny nicks or sore spots. The salt, ash, and chalk form a medieval scrub down that makes your gums tingle in protest. But there's something oddly soothing about it. Maybe it's the routine, or maybe it's the way it drowns out the background noise, the neighbor coughing, the clatter of carts in the street, the ever-present worry that your rent's going up again. For a few minutes, your entire existence is about ash in your mouth. Pure, focused suffering. Here's a fringe fact for you. Some families kept a special tooth hearth spoon, a dedicated implement used only to scoop ash from the stove for dental use. If that sounds weird, remember, these were the same people who used soot to tint eyebrows and arsenic to brighten their complexion. Household crossovers were just part of the charm. And don't forget the spittoon. Yes, in polite homes, you'd have a dedicated bowl for spitting out your dental slurry, made of ceramic or tin. It would sit near the basin and get emptied whenever someone remembered. Let's just say, don't confuse it with your broth pot. Meanwhile, the wealthier crowd was enjoying slightly more refined versions of your concoction. They had access to pre-packaged dentifrices sold in chemist shops. These were essentially early commercial tooth powders, often made from chalk, orris root, burnt alum, and, if they were really fancy, dragon's blood. No, not the fantasy creature. It was a red resin extracted from a tree, believed to have healing properties. It also turned your mouth pink, which some Victorians took as a sign of cleanliness or romance. It's unclear. One mainstream historical fact here: the use of tooth powders wasn't limited to England. Across Europe and in early America, similar recipes circulated, often passed down in handwritten notes or printed in domestic advice columns. Ladies' magazines loved to offer tooth brightening secrets, which often included ingredients like burnt breadcrumbs, ashes, and saltwater rinses. You finish scrubbing, lean over the basin, and spit. The water swirls into a gray froth, clinging to the edges like something you'd clean a chimney with. You rinse twice, maybe 3 times, and still the taste lingers, a sort of dry, ashy echo at the back of your throat. That's the flavor of diligence, you tell yourself, or desperation, maybe both. As you sit by the window, rubbing your jaw with a sooty finger, you think about how deeply these routines ran. People didn't just brush because they were told to. They brushed because it felt moral. Clean teeth were linked to discipline, virtue, and even religious purity. Dirty teeth, a sign of laziness, sin, or poor breeding. Never mind that most people couldn't afford a toothbrush. Victorian society didn't care. A clean mouth was your ticket to decency. There was even a belief that brushing your teeth improved your thoughts. If your breath was fresh, your mind would be too. That sounds silly, until you remember how disorienting a toothache can be. Pain makes fools of us all. You stretch, yawn, and slide into bed, the last bits of chalky salt still tingling along your gums. Outside, a bell rings in the distance. Maybe a carriage, maybe a pub door slamming. Inside, you nestle into the straw mattress and close your eyes. Soot still under your fingernails. Your mouth might feel like you licked a fireplace. But hey, you're practically minty by Victorian standards. You wake to the faint scratching of rats in the walls, a morning alarm no one asks for, but everyone expects. You groan softly, stretch, and feel a crusty sensation still clinging to your back molars. Last night's ash blend had more staying power than you'd hoped. You sit up, reach for a half-dry cloth, and give your teeth a lazy wipe. Good enough. It's a new day, and tonight, you've got something exotic planned. You're going herbal. Yes, herbs. Not just for soup and scandal. In Victorian dental circles, herbs were the poor man's perfume and the closest thing to toothpaste with a scent. Mint, thyme, and sage weren't just tasty, they were part of a growing belief in natural cleansing. You've bartered 2 pennies for a pinch of dried peppermint from a market vendor who smelled vaguely like licorice and lies. You crush it into the base of your cup, adding a sprinkle of salt and just a flicker of chalk dust. This blend, you're told, is favored by actors, schoolteachers, and anyone else trying to avoid public disgrace via dragon breath. You're skeptical, but curious. Let's pause to imagine Victorian breath. Between mutton pies, beer for breakfast, and the distinct lack of refrigeration, it's safe to say that herbal solutions weren't a luxury, they were a social life preserver. And for those who couldn't afford laudanum-laced elixirs or silver-plated toothpicks, crushed mint was the go-to cover-up. You grind your new concoction with a bit of water and dip your finger into the paste. The scent is actually pleasant, a brief flash of something alive amid the usual palette of coal and cabbage. As you begin to scrub, you wonder, did it really help? Or just mask the horrors underneath? Historians still argue whether herbs actually prevented disease or just provided a fragrant distraction. Some researchers point out that essential oils in mint and thyme have antibacterial properties. Others believe that the concentrations in homemade pastes were too weak to do much more than smell nice for 5 minutes. Still, scent mattered. If you smelled clean, you were clean, or at least clean enough to make it through a church service without scaring the choir. That's how much of Victorian hygiene worked. Smoke, mirrors, and mint leaves. You rinse and spit, and for a moment, you're hit with a pang of self-satisfaction. It actually feels fresh, kind of. You almost believe in herbal hygiene. So did plenty of others, especially among the urban middle class who started to embrace natural remedies as a counterpoint to scary-sounding chemicals. One mainstream historical fact for your morning tea: in 1875, the British Dental Association was formed, marking a push toward professionalization and public trust in dentistry. As this happened, advice on natural dental care exploded in popularity. Newspapers published recipes for tooth powders made from crushed clove buds, powdered myrrh, and dried lavender. Of course, not all herbal remedies were harmless. Some women used tartar creams, made with acidic plant extracts that stripped away stains and enamel. Others swore by a rinse of alum and rose water, which tightened gums but also left your tongue feeling like it had been varnished. Still, herbal dental blends became something of a fashion. A proper Victorian lady might carry a small packet of mint powder in her handbag, right next to her vinaigrette and a lock of someone's hair. And a gentleman, he might keep a pinch of crushed cloves in his pocket, not for cooking, but for a quick pre-date mouth rub. You run your tongue across your teeth and decide to go the extra mile. You chew a mint leaf. It tastes sharp and bitter, like crushed grass with ambition, but after a day spent in grimy streets, it's oddly invigorating, like pretending you're in the countryside instead of sharing a wall with 7 other tenants and a very vocal cat. Here's a quirky tidbit: some Victorians believed certain herbs could align your teeth. Not just clean them, move them. A blend of crushed yarrow and vinegar was said to encourage moral alignment and dental straightness. No braces required, just faith and foliage. You grin at the mirror. Well, not a mirror, exactly, more like a slightly shiny tin plate. Your teeth don't look whiter, but they do feel less haunted. You'll take it. It's around this time that you remember your cousin Wilfred. He once tried brushing with onion skins steeped in vinegar, swearing it cured his mouth fog. It didn't, but for 2 weeks, he smelled like a salad gone rogue. That's the thing about these remedies. Each one had a cheerleader and a horror story. Some folks even mixed their own perfumes into dental powders, particularly rose oil and bergamot. The result? A bouquet of confusing smells. Imagine someone trying to seduce you with the breath of a garden sprinkled in burnt chalk. It was all part of the charm. And let's not forget the trend of tooth-rubbing cloths, small squares of linen or flannel infused with herbal paste. You'd wrap one around your finger and buff your teeth like fine silver. These were marketed as elegant and feminine. Rough bristles were too masculine, too aggressive. A lady's touch required lavender and linen. As you prepare for bed, the last traces of mint lingering in your nostrils, you realize something unexpected. You feel almost modern, like you've tapped into an ancient wellness trend that wouldn't be out of place in a spa brochure today. All natural, chemical-free dental polish with aromatherapeutic benefits. Only difference: no soft lighting, no flute music, just candle stubs and the occasional rat thud. The fire burns low as you tuck yourself in, your mouth tingling faintly from peppermint, your hands stained with green powder. You exhale, half expecting a fresh breeze to follow. It doesn't, but you imagine it. That counts. And as the wind rattles the window panes and distant hooves clatter over cobblestones, you smile, knowing that tonight, your breath could probably knock out only half the room. Tonight, you're feeling daring. You stare at the stub of a candle melting on the table. Casting buttery light across a curious little jar you picked up from the apothecary's apprentice, a boy who looked 12 but talked like he'd seen things. Guaranteed to polish and purify, he'd whispered, sliding the container across the counter like it held some forbidden treasure. Inside, brick dust. Yes, actual dust. From bricks, ground into a fine powder that clings to your fingertips and tastes. As you soon find out, like regret and construction sites. But in the grand tradition of Victorian dental experimentation, this wasn't just a prank, it was a trend. You scoop a bit onto your wet fingertip and apply it to your teeth with the same caution someone might use when handling dynamite. The sensation, surprisingly aggressive, like scrubbing your enamel with sandpaper and hope. The logic, if you can call it that, was that brick dust's abrasive quality would scrape away stains, tartar, and any lingering regrets from that mutton pie you probably shouldn't have eaten. Historians still argue whether this was brilliant or absolutely bonkers. Some say the fine grit genuinely helped remove surface buildup. Others insist it just shredded enamel like a cheese grater in slow motion. One mainstream fact: Victorians didn't have access to fluoride, no protective coatings or chemical reinforcements. So anything that polished had to really polish, hence the brick dust. Chalk, pumice, and even crushed porcelain. Yes, people willingly used the powdered remains of fancy teacups on their molars. You spit into the basin and wince. There's a faint pink tinge to the water. That's either a sign of effectiveness or early gum trauma. Hard to say, but for Victorians, a little blood meant you were doing it right. The prevailing wisdom was that pink foam equals purification. Modern dentists would faint. You rinse again and notice the aftertaste lingers, earthy, metallic, stubborn. You try not to think about what that means for your gums. Instead, you examine your teeth in the reflection of the windowpane, now black with night. Do they look shinier? Sort of. It's hard to tell in the gloom, but there's a certain grit-polished honesty to your smile now. You wonder how many people really use this stuff and whether they did so daily, or just before social occasions. Turns out, both. Some treated brick dust like a weekly reset, a deep clean for their mouth, the way you might scrub a sink. Others used it more frequently, believing the rougher the scrub, the better the hygiene. Here's a quirky tidbit: in some homes, people would collect old, crumbling bricks from fireplaces or garden walls, hammer them into chunks, and then grind them with a mortar and pestle. It became a sort of domestic ritual. Children would be sent to gather good red brick from ruins or construction sites, because nothing says oral care like scavenging for debris. Of course, not everyone had access to powdered masonry. Those with fewer resources might substitute burnt toast crumbs, or even crushed bones from the butcher's bin. Yes, bone dust, just another charming Victorian DIY. If it was dry, white, and vaguely gritty, someone probably tried to brush their teeth with it. You sit by the stove, staring at your half-clean cup, and remember a story your neighbor once told, about her cousin who used brick dust and soot together. She swore it made her teeth gleam like polished ivory, until they cracked. Turns out, combining two highly abrasive materials can make your enamel wave a little white flag. This brings us to a common Victorian dilemma. Nobody really understood long-term dental consequences. People did what worked now. Pain-free now, whiter now. The idea of protecting your teeth for old age. Almost laughable when the average person didn't expect to reach their 60s. If your teeth got you through your 40s, they were considered loyal companions. You reach for a toothpick, more like a sliver of bone shaved into a point. These were popular post-cleaning tools, used to dislodge stubborn bits. They came in silver if you were wealthy, but most people used wood, horn, or anything they could sharpen. There's even record of people using sharpened bird feathers. Hygienic? Probably not. But creative? Absolutely. As you poke between two molars, you recall another bizarre trend: mixing your brick dust with honey. Yes, honey. The idea was to soften the paste, make it taste better, and provide natural healing. But adding sugar to your dental routine feels like setting your house on fire to warm it up. Still, desperate times. Interestingly, not everyone in the Victorian world bought into these gritty solutions. Some early reformers, mostly dentists working out of chemist shops, warned against excessive abrasion. One 1860s pamphlet warned that scouring the teeth as one scours a hearth may lead to swift ruination of the dental seat. Which sounds more dramatic than helpful. But the warnings rarely reached the working class. Information moved slowly, especially when it wasn't sensational. People were more likely to hear a friend's brick dust success story than read a dentist's dry leaflet. So, the cycle continued, mouths scrubbed raw in pursuit of cleanliness. You rub your jaw and sigh, the skin of your cheeks still tingling from the scrub. It's hard to say if your teeth are cleaner or just confused. But there's a strange sense of accomplishment, like you've done battle with your own bacteria. The Victorian dental warrior. Outside, rain starts to patter on the rooftops, and you pull a blanket tighter. The fire's embers glow faintly, and the jar of brick dust sits by the basin, lid off, looking innocent, like it didn't just try to sandblast your incisors. You roll over, let your tongue rest against your teeth, and marvel at the strange, sandy smoothness. This isn't what modern mouths are used to, but in 19th century London, it was a badge of honor. You earned that grit, literally. Tomorrow, maybe something gentler, a clove rinse, or, who are you kidding? You've still got half a jar left. Waste not, want not. The rain taps through the night, rhythmic as a leaky faucet, and by morning, it's still going strong. Grey light oozes through the windowpane, casting a pale glow on your face as you rise from the sagging bed. Your jaw feels tender, no doubt a parting gift from last night's enthusiastic encounter with the brick dust. You make a mental note, maybe every other night from now on. You stretch, crack your neck, and shuffle toward the chipped basin. No water yet. The cistern's slow, and the street's delivery boy usually shows up by mid-morning, if he hasn't traded your bucket slot for a meat pie again. Typical. While you wait, you dig through your tiny wooden box of dental curiosities. Today, you're going old school, not just vintage, ancient. You pull out your rag and soot, a classic Victorian combo with roots tangled deep in folklore and the desperate resourcefulness of the working class. First, the soot. You've collected it from the stove's chimney edge, soft, flaky, and still smelling faintly of last week's coal. You sprinkle a pinch onto a bit of linen cloth you cut from a worn-out petticoat. The soot, surprisingly, was once considered almost magical. People believed it not only whitened teeth but warded off mouth spirits. Whatever those were. You wrap the cloth around your index finger, dab it with water from a leftover mug, and begin rubbing your teeth in slow, circular motions. The taste, acrid, earthy, like licking a fireplace, but the cloth softens the experience, creating a gentler scrub than last night's brick-based sandstorm. A fringe belief held by some country folk said that soot from the hearth of a happy home cleaned better than that of a sad one. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic or just another creative excuse for soot-swapping gossip. Mainstream fact: many Victorian children were taught to clean their teeth with a rag dipped in soot or salt water. Often before they could read or write. It was easy, cheap, and strangely effective at removing superficial buildup, though nobody knew why at the time. You notice that this method doesn't sting like the brick dust. It's almost soothing. The cloth molds to the shape of your teeth, sliding into crevices with a gentle friction. It's like petting your molars with a dirty towel, cozy in a weird way. You pause to admire the cloth afterward. It's streaked gray and black, and somehow, that gives you a feeling of success. You hold it up to the candlelight like a battlefield relic. Victory, one incisor at a time. Of course, this kind of dental care had its critics. Some early dentists claimed that soot did more harm than good, arguing that the trace chemicals in chimney deposits, especially from coal, could corrode enamel over time. But then again, most early dentists also believed that tooth pain was caused by worms burrowing through your gums. So their credibility's a bit compromised. Here's a quirky tidbit. Queen Victoria herself reportedly discouraged soot-based hygiene in royal nurseries. Rumor has it she once walked in on a young prince smearing chimney dust across his teeth and was horrified, less by the act, and more by the thought of a monarch's smile dulled by fireplace grit. You grin at the mirror, still just your warped metal plate, and lean in. Do your teeth look cleaner? Hard to say. Less ghostly, perhaps. The soot's abrasiveness isn't as strong, but the cloth's friction does seem to help polish them, like a horse groom brushing down a tired steed. Another debate among scholars. Some suggest that the rag method indirectly improved dental health simply because it encouraged any attention to oral care. In a time when most people ignored their teeth until they hurt, or fell out, daily rubbing, no matter the material, was better than nothing. Your gums tingle lightly, but not unpleasantly. You rinse with water from the jug and spit into the corner pot. Then, as was common among thrifty Londoners, you dry the cloth on a nail by the stove. You use it again tomorrow. Waste not. There's something ritualistic about it. You realize. The careful rubbing, the rag folded just so, the soot portioned by memory rather than measure. It's like a sacred routine, equal parts hygiene and performance. And it reminds you of your grandmother, who used to hum lullabies while scrubbing her own teeth with a wool scrap soaked in lemon juice. Sweet, sour, and utterly fearless. You sit down with a slice of bread and a smear of jam. Fewer teeth make chewing easier, in theory, and read a scrap of newspaper someone left under your door. It's an ad for Dentifrice Royale, promising pearl-white smiles with a single dab of its exotic French formula. You snort. One dab, indeed, probably half lard and rosewater. By contrast, your little soot and cloth routine feels honest, primitive, yes, but sincere. It doesn't hide behind perfume or fancy tins. It gets the job done, or at least makes you feel like it might. Still, you admit to yourself, the idea of something less gritty is tempting. Maybe tomorrow you'll try that chalk lump you've been hoarding, or brave the butcher's ash again. The options are endless and equally questionable. For now, you sip some weak tea, swirl it in your mouth, and lean back in your chair, savoring the quiet. Outside, a neighbor's child is singing an off-key tune about washing cats. Somewhere above you, floorboards creak as someone hauls water or possibly smuggles chickens. You lie back down, wrap yourself in your threadbare blanket, and let the last traces of soot fade from your mouth. It's strange how something so dirty can make you feel so clean. But that's the Victorian paradox, isn't it? Scraping through grime to find a little dignity, or at least, fresher breath. You close your eyes, soot-stained cloth drying gently by the fire, and drift into sleep wondering whether your smile would pass muster in a gaslit ballroom, or at least not clear one. You wake up to a creak in your jaw, not pain exactly, just that faint resistance, like your teeth are holding a quiet grudge. Maybe it's the soot, maybe it's the memory of brick dust trauma still echoing through your molars. Either way, today feels like the perfect moment to try something more refined. Or at least, less scratchy. You shuffle over to your tiny wooden shelf, where you've carefully stashed a small pot labeled Mrs. Latherby's dentifrice powder. Sounds fancy, right? It's not. The label's flaking, and the contents smell like a chalkboard and a cough drop had a child. Still, it's got that aura of mid-tier Victorian aspiration, posh enough to feel superior, cheap enough to be sold next to boot polish. You unscrew the lid, revealing a soft white powder with faint flecks of what looks like mint, or possibly crushed beetles. Hard to say. One whiff and your sinuses open like Victorian double doors. That unmistakable medicinal zing, camphor, clove, some form of powdered optimism. This particular dentifrice is a step up from the DIY methods. Manufactured powders like this were part of a growing industry in the mid-1800s, where dental care was starting to inch its way from household chore into something vaguely professional. A mainstream historical fact, by the 1860s, tooth powders were being mass-produced and advertised to the middle class as essential tools of modern respectability. You dip your damp toothbrush into the jar. It's not a brush in the modern sense, it's more like a hedgehog glued to a stick. The bristles, once horsehair, are now mostly splayed in all directions, like a bad haircut. Still, it does the trick. You scoop a bit of powder onto the bristles, lean over your basin, and start scrubbing. The taste is surprising, sharp, almost metallic, with an undercurrent of spice. Not sweet, but definitely more complex than soot. There's something theatrical about it, like your mouth's been cast in a melodrama and this powder is delivering its final monologue. As you brush, foam gathers at the corners of your lips, not a lot. Just enough to make you feel like the powder is working. That's what the ads always said, watch it froth, and know it fights decay. Of course, historians still argue whether those frothy powders actually cleaned teeth, or just made the user feel cleaner through sudsy placebo. A fringe tidbit: some tooth powders of the era were colored pink. Not for any chemical reason, but to mimic the blush of healthy gums. People believed that pink powder somehow knew how to encourage pink gums. This theory was backed by absolutely no science, but carried a weird romantic appeal, like your teeth were blushing with gratitude. You spit, the foam hits the basin with a hiss, and you lean in to inspect your reflection. It's subtle, but your teeth do look fresher, or at least brighter against your parched lips. The powder seems to polish without scraping, a pleasant surprise, considering your recent adventures in brick-based warfare. You wipe your mouth and glance again at the jar. It's half empty already. You mentally calculate how long it'll last, and whether the apothecary will still accept trade in buttons and jam. Tooth powders like this often contained a mix of ingredients that sound charmingly archaic now: precipitated chalk, powdered myrrh, orris root, even powdered cuttlebone. Yes, that white thing birds chew on. Grind it fine enough, and suddenly it's a dental essential. The Victorians truly saw potential in everything, except modern sanitation. As you ponder this, you recall an anecdote from your cousin, who swore by a powder made with pulverized coral and dried orange peel. She'd buy it from a traveling vendor who sold miracle cures and vanished before the police could ask questions. Her teeth did seem radiant, though she did lose 2 after a particularly crunchy batch. You begin to wonder how powders like this were formulated. Did someone test different ingredients on themselves? Or did they just throw things together, hope for the best, and rely on charming labels? It's hard to imagine anyone had a dental lab back then. More likely, a mortar, a pestle, and lots of confidence. Another mainstream development, around this time, dental professionals began to appear in cities, not just tooth pullers, but trained dentists. Some even endorsed specific powders, lending their names to tins in exchange for a cut of the profit. Dr. Harrison's enamel paste, or Professor Gribber's gum invigorator, which sounds more like a music hall act than a dental aid. You pick up the tin again and squint at the list of ingredients. It's partially obscured by age and steam damage, but one line is still legible, with real Peruvian bark. That's right, some Victorian dentifrices included quinine or other botanical extracts, meant to fight mouth infections. Or perhaps malaria. Either way, exotic. As you rinse, you can't help but feel smug. This is miles ahead of soot or ash. You're not just brushing, you're engaging in a fashionable self-care ritual. The Victorian equivalent of a charcoal face mask and herbal tea. You half expect someone to knock on your door and invite you to a salon discussion about dental enlightenment. You carefully reseal the jar and place it back on the shelf like a prized artifact. These powders may not last forever, but their little moments of minty civility go a long way. In a world of grime and coal dust, a powder that makes you feel like a duchess, even for 5 minutes, is worth its weight in cuttlefish. As you settle into your rickety chair with a cup of weak chicory coffee, you allow yourself a small smile. Your teeth might not be perfect, but they're clean, or at least not visibly tragic. Outside, the rain has stopped, and you hear the squelch of boots in the mud. The water delivery boy, finally. Maybe later you'll trade a spare button for another jar of powder. Or maybe you'll try that experimental rinse your neighbor's obsessed with, the one made from vinegar and eggshells. Because clearly, you have not yet suffered enough. For now, though, you close your eyes, tilt your head back, and let your minty breath rise like incense to the cracked ceiling above. You wake with the taste of mint still haunting your mouth. Not fresh, exactly, more like the ghost of freshness. Faded but persistent, like the smell of perfume on a borrowed scarf. It's oddly comforting, and yet, curiosity nibbles at the edge of your mind. What next? The powder's nice, sure, civilized, but it lacks that certain drama. You want spectacle, you want something theatrical, and that's when you remember the bottle. At the back of your cabinet, half forgotten behind the cracked mug and the tin of mystery ointment, sits a small blue glass vial. You pluck it out gently. Its cork is crumbling. The label, written in the finest mock French cursive, reads, Elixir dentaire et l'essence de charbon et cannelle. Sounds elegant, right, but you know better. This is the infamous tooth elixir your aunt gave you. Along with a wink and a whisper, only use it if your teeth are particularly rebellious. The liquid inside shimmers like ink in low light. It's slightly thick, clinging to the sides as you swirl it. You unstopper it, gingerly, and the smell hits you like a Victorian spice market exploding into your sinuses. Cinnamon, yes, but also clove, charcoal, licorice, and something distinctly medicinal, something that says, this was likely banned in at least one country. Mainstream fact, by the late 1800s, liquid tooth cleansers had joined the hygiene scene, marketed as gentler alternatives to abrasive powders. Many contained alcohol, essential oils, and antiseptics, long before mouthwash was a household term. You tilt the bottle carefully, pouring a few drops onto your toothbrush. This time, the bristles are slightly stiffer. They dried overnight and have regained a bit of their spiky attitude. You brace yourself and begin brushing. The taste is overwhelming, like being punched in the mouth by a cinnamon broom. There's fire, there's heat, your eyes water just a bit. Somewhere, your ancestors wince in ancestral solidarity. Still, you push through. The liquid fizzes lightly on contact, giving you that satisfying sizzle that whispers, science is happening. It spreads easily, coating each tooth like lacquer. You find yourself humming, maybe to distract from the burn. Historians still argue whether these elixirs were more effective at killing bacteria or just at terrifying them into leaving. With ingredients ranging from borax to creosote, they walked a fine line between hygiene and low-level poison. A fringe publication from 1872 even listed spirit of ammonia as a common ingredient in one popular brand, just a splash. To really wake up your gums. You spit into the basin, blinking away the sting. Your mouth feels clean, sure, but also slightly traumatized. You swish a bit of water, and suddenly your breath smells like a Christmas ghost story. There's something festive and mildly haunted about it. Still, there's a thrill in using something so alchemical. The Victorians loved their potions. If it bubbled, stung, or made you question your life choices, it must be working, and in a way, that logic still holds. At least now you feel awake. You stare at the blue vial. How many drops left? Maybe half a dozen. Best to save it for special occasions, like tomorrow morning, or tooth-based emergencies. You recall a tale your neighbor told you, about a traveling salesman who hawked a similar elixir. He claimed it could not only clean your teeth but whiten your soul. For just a penny, he'd give you a swig. Most people swore by it. One woman, unfortunately, swore at it when her tongue went numb for 3 days. Word spread. He moved on. You tuck the vial back into its dusty alcove. Nestled like treasure, and treasure it is. In a world of grime and molasses, anything that makes your breath less existentially heavy is a gift. There's something to be said for these liquid cleansers. They feel modern, almost futuristic in their convenience. No powder spills, no soot trails, just a few drops and a dash of courage. They were especially popular with upwardly mobile Victorians, those eager to escape the coal-stained teeth of their childhood and smile their way into polite society. Of course, they were also expensive. Imported ingredients, fancy bottles, labels in foreign languages, because if it's in French, it has to be legit. You remember the apothecary once trying to upsell you a tooth tonic he claimed came from Paris. You later found the same bottle behind a butcher's stall, labeled floor polish. Another fringe tidbit, one brand of elixir, known as Dr. Tumbrel's Gentle Gargle, advertised itself as safe enough to drink. Not recommended, of course, but possible. Naturally, people did drink it. One man used it as a cocktail base. His obituary didn't mention dental hygiene, but his teeth were reportedly dazzling. You make a note to find a safer alternative, just in case this particular bottle turns out to be slightly more combustible than advertised. Maybe you'll experiment with a home-brewed rinse. Vinegar, clove oil, peppermint. How hard could it be? You rinse once more and glance at your reflection. Your teeth glisten faintly in the candlelight, not just clean, but shimmering with the smugness of someone who's risked mild chemical injury for the sake of hygiene. The rest of your day unfolds quietly. A bit of mending, a chat with the milk lady, a rather long debate over whether rats are preferable to bats in the attic. Answer: neither. But rats at least don't flap. But all the while, your mouth feels awake, tingling, alert, like it's just waiting for the next bold experiment. And why not? You're a pioneer, a one-person dental revolution, armed with elixirs, powders, soot, and a toothbrush that could double as a paintbrush in a pinch. As night falls and the city hums with distant carriage wheels, you lie back in bed, mouth still tingling slightly, and smile into the darkness. The Victorian world may be harsh, gritty, and weirdly obsessed with cinnamon, but at least your teeth are along for the ride, shiny, spicy, and just a little bit heroic. The morning greets you with a sighing floorboard and a soft ache behind your molars. Not pain exactly, more of a complaint. Like your teeth woke up before you and are already grumbling about their job. You stretch, crack your knuckles, and wonder, What new indignity shall I subject my mouth to today? You don't have to wait long for inspiration. From your tiny table, a folded piece of newspaper slides to the floor, fluttering like a sleepy moth. On the back, an ad. Dr. Penwhistle's patented chewing wafers, for the gentleman who smiles with confidence. Beneath it, a dashing sketch of a man with impossibly white teeth and a suspiciously narrow jawline. You remember these. They came in a tin with a clunky latch and the promise of effortless oral bliss. You dig through your cabinet and, miracle, find the tin. Still sealed. You peel back the lid, revealing a row of small, chalky squares that resemble furniture polish more than food. The smell is pleasant, though: vanilla, clove, and something herbal, possibly thyme, possibly thyme's evil cousin. Mainstream fact: chewing items like tooth-cleaning wafers or gum were often marketed in the late Victorian period as ways to, passively, clean the teeth during the day. They were especially popular with clerks and travelers who didn't have easy access to water or basins. You pluck one from the tin and pop it into your mouth. It's like biting into a peppermint-scented paving stone. Hard, dry, slightly dusty. You chew slowly, carefully, like negotiating with a stubborn biscuit. The flavor spreads, subtle but persistent, clinging to your tongue and gums. And as you chew, you notice something unexpected. The dry texture seems to absorb saliva, pulling bits of yesterday's regret from between your teeth. You keep chewing. A minute passes, then two. The wafer dissolves into a grainy paste and then, nothing. It's gone, like Victorian promises of universal healthcare. Historians still argue whether these wafers actually cleaned anything or merely served as mouth fresheners. Some were infused with antiseptic oils. Others relied entirely on mechanical friction, scraping plaque as you chewed. Much like horses nibbling hay, the line between dental hygiene and livestock care was sometimes blurry. You swallow the last trace of wafer and breathe out slowly. Your mouth feels neutral, not minty fresh, but not tragic either. Somewhere in the middle, like a hotel pillow, functional, but not memorable. A fringe tidbit: one eccentric inventor from Glasgow claimed to have developed a self-chewing wafer that would vibrate once moistened, massaging the gums from within. It was never mass-produced, likely because no one wanted their mouth to buzz like a faulty lantern. You pick up the tin again. It rattles faintly, maybe 8 wafers left. Do you ration them, or burn through the lot like a decadent dental daredevil? Hard to say. In this era, even chewing felt like a commitment. But there's something appealing about these passive cleaning methods. They're discreet. They don't require water or brushes or time crouched over a basin. You imagine a genteel gentleman walking through Hyde Park, tipping his hat and chewing a wafer as he contemplates life and plaque removal. Of course, not all were created equal. Some wafers contained ground seashells, which could erode enamel over time. Others used sugar as a base, which is like hiring termites to guard your wooden fence. You glance at your tin. Suddenly suspicious. No sugar listed. But then again, the label also claims these wafers strengthen the spirit. You open the window for some fresh air, letting the London breeze ruffle your curtains and your eyebrows. The scent of chimney smoke and bakery yeast swirls in. Somewhere, a street vendor is hawking roasted chestnuts. Your stomach growls. You wonder if chewing a wafer counts as breakfast. You decide to follow it up with a rinse. Nothing fancy. Just warm water and a splash of vinegar. It burns slightly but chases away the last ghost of chalk from your tongue. The combination of vinegar and wafer feels oddly effective, as if your mouth has been polished by a minimalist butler. You jot a mental note: wafers in the morning, rinse in the afternoon, and if you're feeling bold, a brush with powder at night. A full Victorian routine. It's like CrossFit for your teeth. As the day rolls on, you find yourself craving another chew, not for cleanliness, but for comfort. There's something rhythmic, soothing about it. Your jaw works methodically, your tongue chasing stray crumbs like a sleepy detective. You're not just cleaning, you're meditating with your molars. You remember overhearing a lady at the apothecary claiming she chewed her way through 2 tins a week and hadn't seen a dentist in 5 years. "Because I chew instead of stew," she said with a wink, which made no sense then and even less now. Still, her teeth looked decent, or at least not alarming. You pluck another wafer and pop it in. This time, the taste is slightly off, more peppery, less clove. Maybe they vary by batch. Or maybe this one absorbed some cabinet flavor. You chew anyway, because at this point, you're committed. You and your teeth are in this together. Through soot and powder, through elixir and wafer. By evening, you feel strangely accomplished. Not in any grand sense, no bridges built or novels penned, but your mouth feels clean. And in this grimy, grim Victorian world, that's a minor miracle. You light a candle and stare at the flame. Its flicker dancing across your reflection in the cracked mirror. Your teeth catch the glow, still slightly crooked. Yes, but bright, determined, ready for another day of chewing, scrubbing, swishing, and surviving. You place the wafer tin back in its drawer like a sacred relic. It clinks softly, promising future freshness. You yawn, your jaw creaks. You stretch again and roll your tongue along your teeth, silently nodding to the tiny chalk soldiers holding the line. And as the candle burns lower, and the world outside fades to soot and shadow, you allow yourself a quiet grin. You may not have a dentist on call. You may not own a floss. But you've got wafers. You wake to the sound of bells, soft, distant, and persistent. Church bells, maybe, or perhaps the baker down the street finally fixed that rusty bull rope on his delivery cart. Either way, it's morning again, and your mouth feels weirdly smug. It's not the squeaky clean feeling you'd expect from a modern dental visit. More like the contentment of a cat who knocked something off a shelf and walked away guilt-free. You stretch, smile, and remember the wafers. Oh yes, chalky, stubborn little lifesavers. But today, you crave something a little more hands-on. You shuffle to the mirror. The candle's burned low, the basin is cold, and the toothbrush waits patiently like a soldier at rest. But beside it, tucked into a cracked porcelain cup, is the tool you nearly forgot, your dental scraper. Ah yes, the Victorian tongue depress's terrifying cousin. A delicate, curved metal hook with a wooden handle and the casual menace of a lockpick. Time for some real cleaning. Mainstream fact: dental scrapers, also called scalers, were widely used by 19th century dentists and increasingly recommended for home hygiene. They helped remove tartar and calculus from tooth surfaces, especially near the gum line. You hold it delicately. This isn't a tool for the faint of heart, or shaky of hand. You ease open your mouth and begin, gently, scraping along your bottom incisors. The feeling is electric. Not painful, exactly, but it wakes something primal, like dragging your fingernail across a chalkboard inside your skull. You pause, exhale through your nose, and try again. Slow, steady strokes. The edge of the scraper collects tiny deposits, hard little flecks that look like miniature fossils. You stare at them, amazed and a little disgusted. That was in my mouth. You scrape more. Historians still argue whether self-scaling was effective or dangerous. Some praised it as a way for the working class to maintain their own hygiene without costly dentist visits. Others warned of gum damage, infection, and the horrifying possibility of chipping your own tooth in dim lighting. You work carefully, scraping one tooth at a time. The sound is subtle but distinct, like someone whispering secrets through a cheese grater. It's weirdly satisfying. and slightly terrifying, but you feel productive, like you're doing the work. This isn't passive chewing, this is dental labor. A fringe tidbit. One 1885 hygiene manual recommended soaking your scraper in gin between uses to cleanse the steel and calm the nerves. A multitasker's dream. You don't have gin. You settle for hot water with a splash of vinegar. It smells like a salad and feels like victory. The trick, you've discovered, is angling the tool just so. Not too deep, not too shallow, like picking a lock, but the lock is your mouth and the treasure is dental survival. Your gums protest slightly, pink, swollen, not thrilled with the intrusion, but they'll forgive you, eventually. You rinse with warm salt water. The Victorian cure-all. Your mouth tingles. Your scraper gleams faintly in the morning light, resting now like a knight's sword after battle. You glance in the mirror. Your teeth don't look that different, but you feel the difference. Smoothness, clean lines, no more fuzzy tartar hugs. But you also feel oddly exposed, like you shaved your head or cleaned your inbox. Too much clarity, too much openness. Your tongue patrols the new terrain, marveling at the freshly scrubbed surfaces like a tourist on a marble floor. And here's the thing, no one talks about the post-scraping vulnerability. Your teeth are naked, unarmored. Every breath of cold air hits like a scandal. You sip some lukewarm tea to recover. Your tongue refuses to stop poking your molars. As you sit with your warm mug, you think about how Victorians viewed dental health. It wasn't just about vanity. It was about moral character. Clean teeth meant self-discipline. Dirty teeth meant sloth. And scrapers were the holy weapons in that war. You imagine a wealthy gentleman standing at his mirror, scraping with all the precision of a surgeon, while muttering self-affirmations about discipline and fortitude. You imagine a chimney sweep doing the same by candlelight, using a bent spoon instead. Because, yes, some people couldn't afford scrapers. Improvised tools abounded: fork tines, hairpins, the occasional sharpened twig, anything to get the grime off before dinner with in-laws. You set your scraper down and admire it like a favorite pen. It's not elegant, not polished, but it gets the job done, like a tiny scythe for your own personal harvest of plaque. Your gums are still pulsing. You make a mental note, maybe don't do all the teeth at once next time. Pace yourself. You're not in a dental decathlon. You're in a relationship with your mouth. And relationships need boundaries. To soothe things, you mix up a soft rinse, rosewater, clove, and a pinch of baking soda. You swish, slowly, it helps. The sting fades. Your mouth relaxes. You're no longer under siege. Fringe rumor time. One eccentric dentist in Bath allegedly used dental scraping as a form of therapy, claiming the act released oral tension linked to melancholia. His practice was shut down after he tried to scrape someone's tongue for closure. You're not scraping your tongue. Let's be clear, but you do clean it with a cloth, dabbed in mint oil, gently, tenderly, like you're apologizing for everything the scraper just did. The rest of your day unfolds gently. You walk to the apothecary, jaw slightly tense. You speak less than usual, not out of pain, but reverence, like someone who's just been to confession. Your mouth, now sanctified, deserves a quiet day. That evening, you avoid powders, wafers, and strong elixirs. You sip herbal tea and run your finger along your teeth, marveling at the sleekness. You're not perfect, you're not a dentist, but tonight, you feel like one. And as the candle flickers low and the city yawns beneath a damp blanket of fog, you smile once again, not wide, not flashy, just enough to feel the smooth glint of scraper-cleaned enamel. Tomorrow, you'll probably revert to powder and chew a wafer like nothing happened. But tonight, you rest knowing that, at least once this week, you scraped away the past and left only gleaming promise behind. You dreamt of teeth. Not falling out, not crumbling into sugar cubes. Just teeth, lined up like tombstones. endless and white, whispering things you don't understand. When you wake, it takes a moment to shake the feeling. Your jaw aches faintly, and you wonder, was I grinding my teeth? Or were they grinding me? You sit up slowly. The room is still and a little too quiet. The air feels heavy, as if it's soaked in old secrets and a bit of vinegar. You pad over to your basin and glance in the mirror. Yep, the dream didn't bleach your teeth into pearls. They're still there, real, solid, slightly mismatched, glorious. Today, though, you're trying something different. You reach into the cabinet and pull out a squat little bottle with a crooked cork. The label is half torn, but you can still make out the word charcoal. A soot-black powder clings to the inside of the glass like the remains of a bonfire. Charcoal. Not the fancy modern kind in a squeeze tube promising whitening magic and Instagram smiles. No, this is straight-up burned wood. Pulverized. Pure. The Victorian dentist's fallback when breadcrumbs, vinegar, and chalk just didn't cut it. Mainstream fact: charcoal was used throughout the 19th century as a natural abrasive to clean teeth and freshen breath. It absorbed odors and oils, and many considered it a superior alternative to chalk or soap powders. You uncork the bottle, and immediately the room smells like a campsite that ended in bad decisions. The powder is fine and velvety, like soot mixed with ash. You tap a bit onto a cloth, dampen it with water, and press it against your teeth. You rub gently, working from front to back, side to side. The sensation is gritty, not unpleasant, but undeniably earthy. Your mouth feels like it's being sandpapered by the ghost of a fireplace. You spit into the basin. The water turns murky black, like ink spilled in a storm. You stare at it for a second too long, wondering what else you've swallowed in your lifetime without realizing. Historians still argue whether charcoal caused long-term tooth damage. Some records suggest it preserved enamel when used gently. Others hint at abrasive erosion, especially when overused or poorly ground. The Victorian solution: use it and hope for the best. A fringe tidbit: some eccentric Victorian households kept dental soot jars near the fireplace. After a fire died down, they would scrape the cleanest ashes into these jars, believing homegrown charcoal was purer and more spiritually resonant. Yes, really. You rinse your mouth twice, a third time, just to be safe. Your gums feel invigorated, like they've been woken up by a stern governess. Your teeth, well, they don't look whiter yet, but they feel strangely matte, like someone chalked over them with a tiny blackboard. You smile. It's a bit witchy, but oddly satisfying. Still, you wonder, did it work? You run your tongue along your teeth. No fuzz, no grime, just an odd powdery aftertaste, somewhere between a burnt marshmallow and revenge. You try again, this time mixing the charcoal with a touch of honey and peppermint oil, an old apothecary trick rumored to soothe gums while scrubbing enamel. The paste looks like tar. You hesitate, then shrug. You've done worse. This blend goes on smoother, less grit, more glide, and the peppermint gives it a medicinal kick, like brushing with haunted chewing gum. You hum softly as you work, channeling every 19th century herbalist who ever muttered about balance and bile. As you spit again, now with a satisfying minty aftershock, you feel oddly proud. You're not just cleaning your teeth. You're participating in history, one powdered soot blob at a time. You imagine a Victorian dentist, coat stained, spectacles fogged, leaning in with a finger full of this same black grit. "Hold still," he says, voice low, "this will cleanse the soul." And maybe it does, in its own, scratchy way. Later, as you sit with a cup of lukewarm tea, milk, no sugar, can't tempt decay now, you reflect on what you've learned. That cleaning isn't always about gloss. Sometimes it's about subtraction. You're removing layers of gunk. Yes, but also of assumption. That clean must mean white. That fresh must mean mint. No, sometimes clean is just not dirty. You remember an old ad from a magazine tucked beneath your mattress. Charcoal, the Earth's gentle dentist. The ad showed a smiling woman, her teeth dark from the powder, proclaiming she felt closer to the elements. Whatever that means, probably something spiritual, or at least poetic. You catch your reflection again, lips stained gray, teeth dull with residue, and laugh softly. You look like a coal miner at a masquerade ball. You rinse again, just to be sure. And here's something odd. Your breath feels cleaner than it's felt in days. No powdery aftershock, no vinegar cloud, just neutral, like breathing through linen. You decide to do a final rinse, rosewater and lemon. Because if you're going to do Victorian dental care, you might as well smell faintly of a floral pastry. As the day winds down, you tuck the charcoal bottle back into the cabinet. A little goes a long way. And while you wouldn't use it daily, it's earned its place in your toolkit, right beside the scraper and the wafers and your growing sense of historical recklessness. You light your candle and stare at its soft flame. You smile. Your teeth catch a glint. Faint but satisfying. You didn't polish them to Hollywood perfection. You scraped. You rubbed. You scoured. You used the ashes of trees and the patience of saints. And you survived. Tomorrow might bring back the powders or the rinse. But tonight, your teeth rest under a thin blanket of pride and peppermint-scented mystery. The kind of clean only soot can offer. You wake with a peculiar feeling, not in your mouth, but in your hands. A twitch, a tingling, the kind of restless energy that says, build something today. Not a chair, not a hat rack, something smaller, stranger, a tool. Specifically, you feel the overwhelming need to make your own toothbrush. You stumble to the basin, splash cold water on your face, and stare at your reflection like it's about to argue with you. It doesn't. That's good, because this morning, you're not just a sleepy Victorian with morning breath. You're an inventor. Mainstream fact: in 19th century Britain, mass-produced toothbrushes were available, but many people, especially in rural or working-class areas, crafted their own from common materials like twigs, animal bones, or even feather quills. You rifle through your modest belongings. In the corner, beside a loose floorboard and a mouse that may or may not pay rent, you find it, a worn soup bone, leftover from Tuesday's stew. Perfect. It's still greasy. That's fine. You scrub it with salt and vinegar until it no longer smells like regret. Then you grab a small knife, the kind you usually use for peeling apples, and begin to whittle one end flat, forming a rough handle. It's not pretty, but it fits your hand, and it feels purposeful. Historians still argue whether DIY bone brushes were more effective than commercial ones. Some say the homemade versions allowed for customization and better grip. Others point out they often lacked proper bristles and hygiene standards, making them barely better than a dirty finger. You're determined to prove them wrong. Now comes the tricky part: the bristles. You consider your options. You don't have access to imported boar hair, the gold standard for Victorian brushes. But you do have a stiff broom in the hallway and a suspicious tuft of horsehair left over from an old upholstery job. You go with the horsehair. It's more authentic, more historical. You boil it for cleanliness, or at least to pretend. Then tie it into tiny bundles with thread. You drill small holes into the top of the bone handle, well, more like poke and wiggle with a heated pin, and thread the bundles through. It takes a while. Your fingers cramp. The horsehair flops dramatically, but eventually, you hold it in your hand, your own homemade toothbrush, bone handle, horsehair bristles, a labor of oddly specific love. You smile, then pause, then immediately second-guess everything. Is it safe? Is it sanitary? Will your teeth forgive you? A fringe tidbit: one 1870s letter from a Yorkshire maid recounts how she crafted a brush from porcupine quills found in her employer's exotic menagerie. She claimed it made her gums sing with discipline. The porcupine was not consulted. You press your creation to your teeth. The first stroke feels like brushing with a handful of pine needles. It's firm, a little too firm. You ease up, switch angles, and try again. It works, sort of. You lather up some old powder and scrub lightly. The sensation is scratchy, bristly, but deeply satisfying, like cleaning your soul with a doormat. It makes you wonder, how many people, long before you, bent over basins with tools like this? How many lived entire lives with just bone and bristle between them and a mouth full of decay? There's something sobering about it. You rinse, marvel at the slightly blood-tinged foam in the basin, and nod to yourself. You'll need to soften those bristles, maybe soak them in oil, or prayer. But overall, not bad at all. Later that day, you decide to make a second one, this time using the end of a twig and some sewing thread. It's more primitive, sure, but there's something almost elegant about it. You chew the end to fray it, an old trick from India known as the Maswak method, which actually predates the Victorian era by centuries. You try that version, too. It's gentler, more forgiving. The wood fibers massage your gums like a tiny broom whispering bedtime stories. You take both versions and lay them on a cloth to dry. Side by side, bone and wood, horsehair and twig, two approaches to the same problem. Two little tributes to humanity's ongoing, often ridiculous war against dental decay. It hits you then, like a slow sigh. Victorian dentistry wasn't a system. It was a spectrum. Some people had factory-made brushes and imported powders. Others had chewed sticks and burnt crumbs. But all of them, noble or pauper, woke up with a mouth that needed dealing with. You feel weirdly connected to them, the same way you feel when you see old handwriting or antique tools. Like someone else once stood where you stand, muttering and spitting and hoping they got the angle right. You decide to leave the tools out in the open, displayed on your washstand like trophies. A reminder that survival doesn't always look glamorous. Sometimes it's crooked bristles and improvised handles. Another fringe fact: some Victorian travel kits included collapsible toothbrushes made from silver and ivory, with interchangeable heads. Portable, stylish, and completely over the top. One aristocrat was said to have a set engraved with the days of the week, just so he wouldn't accidentally use Monday's brush on a Thursday. Scandalous. You wrap up your tools and mark the bone-handled one with a tiny ink dot. For identification, for pride, for posterity. And just before bed, you give one last brush, with the wooden one this time, because you're not a barbarian. Your gums sigh in appreciation. You lie down, not just clean but clever. You didn't just follow instructions. You made something. You crafted a solution with your own two hands and a whisper of horsehair. As the candle flickers low, you imagine future archaeologists unearthing your DIY toothbrush and puzzling over it. What was this? A ritual object? A weapon? A failed musical instrument? Nope, just you, trying your best, one scrape at a time. Tonight, your teeth feel, well, let's be honest, tired. Not in pain, not throbbing, just sort of over it. After charcoal and burnt bread and your artisanal horsehair brush, your mouth is quietly protesting. Could we maybe not sandblast the enamel tonight? It seems to say. Fair. So, instead of brushing, scraping, or rinsing yourself half to death, you decide to go deeper into the world of Victorian dental folklore. Because believe it or not, the 1800s weren't just about crude tools and questionable powders. They were also rife with beliefs, myths, home remedies passed down by whisper and hope. Tonight, you're going to try some. Mainstream fact: many Victorian households, especially in rural areas, relied on folk wisdom and herbalism for dental care. Professional dentistry was expensive and frankly, terrifying, so people often turn to natural cures for everything from toothache to loose molars. You begin with cloves. Clove oil was a staple in Victorian home medicine cabinets. Just a drop on an aching tooth, and suddenly the pain dulled. Not gone, but soothed. You dab a little clove oil onto a cotton ball and tuck it near your back molar. Immediately, your mouth feels like it's being politely set on fire. But it does help. The warmth is oddly comforting, like your gums are being hugged by something slightly sinister. Historians still argue whether clove oil was truly effective or just a distraction. Some claim its eugenol content genuinely numbs nerves. Others suspect the burning sensation simply gave people something louder to focus on than their toothache. While the clove works its numbing magic, you move on to your next remedy, sage tea. You boil a few dried sage leaves, left over from that disastrous lamb stew, and let the mixture steep until it smells like your grandmother's garden. Then you swish it gently, letting the warm bitterness coat your teeth. It's soothing, earthy, like your mouth is having a small conversation with a forest. A fringe tidbit: in parts of rural Scotland, people believed that planting sage in the shape of a cross near your doorstep would protect you from toothache. Not cure it, prevent it. Because apparently even molars fear holy geometry. You make a note to test this theory later. For science. Feeling emboldened, you raid your makeshift apothecary for more curiosities. There's a dusty jar labeled myrrh resin. You blink at it. Myrrh, biblical, bitter, mysterious, was another go-to remedy for bleeding gums and mouth infections. Victorians ground it into powder, mixed it with wine or vinegar, and used it as a rinse or paste. You do the same. The taste is medieval, like licking the inside of a cathedral. But again, it leaves your gums feeling firmer, less inflamed, a bit like they've just come home from a disciplinary retreat. You start to see a pattern. These remedies aren't flashy, they don't whiten or sparkle. They ground you, they soothe and stabilize, like a lullaby hummed by a botanist. You even try salt water, simple, dependable, humbling. It stings, yes, but only for a moment. Then the ache ebbs, leaving your mouth quiet and well-behaved. You pause for breath. Your mirror shows a face faintly steamed from tea and vinegar. Your eyes look clearer, somehow, as if tending to your teeth with sage and myrrh was really about tending to you. A whisper of superstition nudges at the edge of your memory, the tale of the tooth worm. Yes, you remember now. Back before the microscope ruined everyone's fun, people believed that tiny worms lived inside your teeth. When your mouth hurt, it wasn't because of decay, it was because the worm was angry. Or cold, or bored. Treatments ranged from smoking the worm out with herbs to placing garlic cloves beside the cheek to lure it into the open. A fringe fact: in some early Victorian circles, dentists carried tiny carved worms made of ivory. After treating a patient, they'd claim to have extracted the creature, and proudly display the fake worm as proof. It was half performance, half placebo, and wholly unsettling. Historians still argue whether patients truly believed in the worms or simply went along with the ritual to feel better. Either way, it worked, for a time. You finish your routine with a dab of honey, not to clean, but to coat. Some Victorian healers swore by raw honey for soothing sores and promoting gum health. You let a little dissolve on your tongue, and it's like a bedtime story in sugar form. For a moment, you sit very still. Your mouth is quiet, no scraping, no bristles, just warmth, spice, and sweetness. You feel almost monastic, like a medieval monk who's lost all his teeth to wisdom and clove oil. You think back to a quote you once read in a very old, very damp book: "The mouth is the vestibule of the soul." Victorians loved this sort of thing, grand statements about humble body parts. But tonight, it rings true. Your mouth isn't just a food chute, it's a gateway. And tonight, you've treated it like one. You blow out your candle. The room dips into shadow. Your breath smells faintly of cloves and forests. Your teeth aren't whiter, but they're calm, like a house after a storm. You curl under the blankets, your tongue tracing the edges of molars not yet lost to time. You've learned that sometimes, care doesn't have to be harsh. That healing can smell like spice and taste like wood smoke. That folklore, while absurd, often hides real wisdom under layers of myth and clove oil. As your eyes drift shut, you whisper a quiet thanks to the sage, to the myrrh, and maybe, just maybe, to the toothworm, wherever it's hiding. You wake with a strange sensation, not pain, not pressure, but presence. A tooth is trying to leave you, not a front tooth. No, this is one of the molars. One of the back benches that usually does its job without much fuss. But now it's throbbing with quiet protest, pulsing like a drumbeat you didn't invite to the party. You swallow, once, twice, still there. Congratulations, you are now a full-fledged Victorian dental patient. Mainstream fact: in the mid to late 1800s, tooth extraction was by far the most common dental procedure. Fillings were expensive and relatively rare, and preventative care was laughably limited, so when in doubt, yank it out. You clutch your cheek, shuffle to your water basin, and peer at your reflection. Your gum looks slightly swollen. The tooth in question isn't loose yet, but it definitely has plans. Long-term plans, possibly involving an abscess, possibly involving vengeance. You sigh and weigh your options. You could ride it out, hope the inflammation dies down, maybe lean into more clove oil and sage tea. Or you could visit the local barber surgeon. Yes, that's still a thing. Fringe tidbit: in many small Victorian towns, the local barber did more than trim hair and lather cheeks. He also extracted teeth, set bones, and offered tonics that could kill a goat. The iconic red and white barber pole. That's not just decorative, it represents blood and bandages. So yes, your friendly neighborhood snipper might also be your emergency oral surgeon. Historians still argue whether barber surgeons were more practical or more dangerous. Some were skilled and careful, others worked with rusty pliers, a bad attitude, and a shot of gin. You decide to take a walk. As you step outside, the cobblestones greet you with the familiar crunch of a morning gone slightly sideways. You pass the baker, the milk cart, a pair of boys chasing each other with a dead pigeon, and then you see it. A faded sign swinging in the breeze, barber, teeth pulled, no screaming. Comforting. You step inside, and the scent hits you: bay rum, tobacco, and something vaguely metallic. The barber greets you with a nod. He's large, cheerful, and missing 3 of his own front teeth. This does not inspire confidence. You point to your cheek. He nods, as if this is an everyday occurrence, which it is. You lower yourself into the chair, leather creaking beneath you. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't check records. He doesn't even warm his hands. Instead, he pulls out a tool that looks like a cross between a fireplace poker and an ice tong. He calls it a dental key. Yes, a key. A horrifying fact: before modern forceps, many Victorian dentists used the dental key, a tool that clamped onto a tooth and was twisted. Like unlocking a particularly cursed treasure chest, the success rate was inconsistent. He tells you to bite down on a cloth. You do. He tells you to hold still. You try. He tells you, this will hurt. It does. But not for long. With a sickening crunch and a flood of pressure, the tooth gives up. There is blood. There is noise. There is a moment where the world shrinks to a tunnel of sensation. And then it's over. He hands you the tooth in a rag, like a grim party favor. You don't know what to do with it, so you pocket it, out of politeness. You'll probably bury it later, or feed it to the neighbor's cat. Symbolism. You stagger home, jaw numb, heart pounding, pride slightly dented. You spend the afternoon nursing your face with a cool cloth and muttering oaths at the ceiling. By evening, the pain has dulled to a tolerable throb. You sit at your table, staring at the tooth like it's a former friend who betrayed you. Which, to be fair, it was. You brew some sage tea, not to rinse, just to hold, to feel the warmth in your hands. You're not angry, just tired. One more piece of you gone. One more reminder that life, like dentistry, often involves loss. A fringe belief you recall: some Victorians saved their extracted teeth in little boxes, believing they might need them again in the afterlife. Others threw them into fires to burn the pain away. You haven't decided which camp you belong to, but you do want it out of your pocket. You wrap it in a handkerchief and place it on the windowsill. A little offering to the night, a tiny monument to your suffering. The wind rattles the glass, and for a moment you swear you hear laughter, not cruel, just amused, as if the ghosts of toothaches past are clinking glasses somewhere, toasting your initiation. You toast them back, with a silent, aching smile. You fall asleep with a slight gap in your smile and a growing respect for the people who endured this before you, who braved barber chairs and bone-crushing tools without anesthesia or antiseptic, who didn't flinch, or did, but kept going anyway, and who, like you, probably lay in the dark afterward wondering what else they could live without. You wake up a little crooked. Not emotionally, physically. The side of your jaw where the tooth used to live is sore, stiff, and just a little bit lopsided. Chewing is a negotiation. Speaking feels like pushing gravel through a sock. And grinning, off the table entirely. Still, you survive your tea, barely. Then you spot it, your old toothbrush, the one with the horsehair bristles. It glares at you from the wash basin, silently judging. You owe it nothing, but still, you feel compelled. Maybe a little rinse, something gentle. You grip the handle like a truce flag and scrub delicately, just the front teeth. The rest of your mouth feels like a recently raided village. And just like that, your mind drifts again, because now that you've crossed the bridge of tooth extraction, the next big Victorian dental milestone looms ahead. Dentures. Mainstream fact: full or partial dentures were incredibly common in Victorian Britain, especially among the upper classes, who often had the money to replace what they'd lost. By the late 1800s, having a full set of pearly, false, whites was a status symbol, even if they squeaked. You lie back on your narrow bed and close your eyes, imagining the moment, you, entering a dusty little shop off a foggy alleyway, led by a sign that reads, "Prosthetics of Distinction." Inside, the air smells like varnish, candle wax, and distant regret. A man in wire-rimmed spectacles greets you with excessive enthusiasm. He's not a dentist, not officially, but he's a mechanical artisan, which is just as reassuring. He presents you with a series of options. Option 1, carved ivory, cold, pale, prone to cracking, and harvested from very unhappy elephants. Option 2, human teeth, actual human teeth, wired into a base of gold or vulcanized rubber. These were sometimes purchased from desperate poor folks, or looted from battlefields. You stare too long at this option and feel slightly haunted. Fringe tidbit: after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, thousands of teeth were collected from fallen soldiers and sold across Europe. These Waterloo teeth were considered high quality, young, healthy, unspoiled, and became the gold standard, no pun intended, for elite dentures. Wearing a mouthful of someone else's history wasn't considered strange. It was stylish. You pick up a sample plate. It's heavier than you expect. There's a slight rattle. You set it down quickly. Option 3, porcelain, a late-century favorite, stain-resistant, smoother, less human, but brittle and noisy. Early porcelain teeth had a tendency to clack during conversation or Worse, pop out mid-sentence. The Victorian dinner party horror stories are real. Historians still argue whether the shift to porcelain marked genuine medical progress or just aesthetic ambition. Ivory stained, real teeth decayed, but porcelain looked nice. And if your jaw clicked like a haunted marionette, well, at least you dazzled while doing it. The artisan fits you with a wax mold, gently pressing it against your gums. It's warm and gooey and vaguely humiliating, like biting into a candle. He assures you it will help shape the final fit. You return a week later for the fitting. The dentures don't fit, not really. They sit in your mouth like a stranger on the wrong bus seat. Too tight in the back, too loose in the front. They squeak when you chew. They whistle when you breathe. But they look perfect. He holds up a mirror. You smile. It's not your smile, but it's a smile. Back home, you practice wearing them. The first few hours are awkward. The first meal is disastrous. But over time, days, maybe weeks, you learn the dance. You adjust your speech, your chewing, your expectations. You keep your old teeth, of course, tucked in a box. You think of them often, like lost friends who made questionable decisions but were always there for you. You try to remember what it was like to bite into an apple without strategy, or to laugh without sounding like a tambourine. Those days are behind you. Now, you're porcelain, gold, and gum cement. But you're also dignified. You look distinguished, and when you catch your reflection in the window, you nod at yourself like a person who's survived something. Because you have. Fringe curiosity. There were rumors in the late 1800s of flexible dentures, gums made from softened gutta percha or rubber that would mold to your mouth over time. But these were temperamental, warped with heat, and sometimes oozed an unpleasant smell when worn too long. So, essentially, they were mouth-bound lava lamps. As you sit by the fire that evening, sipping broth, you notice something strange. You miss your toothache. Not the pain, never the pain, but the attention, the ritual, the clove oil, the sage, the warm rinse and quiet hum of self-care. Now, with your mouth full of foreign elegance, you feel just a little disconnected. You touch your jaw, feel the unfamiliar smoothness of the denture base. You smile again, this time slower. The squeak is less noticeable now, almost endearing. You're reminded of something an old writer once said: "We do not remember days, we remember moments." You think of the tooth on the windowsill, the clove's warm sting, the dentist's smug confidence, the way your voice changed slightly the first time you spoke with your new teeth. These moments will stay. And maybe, just maybe, you'll get used to smiling again, not because your teeth are whole, but because you are. You're chewing with caution now. Each bite is a tentative treaty between you and your brand new porcelain tenants. But let's be honest, it's better than it was. You're no longer worried about unexpected tooth grenades exploding in your mouth. That's progress. Still, the ritual remains. You clean your dentures with diligence. Lay them carefully in their soaking bowl at night like someone tucking in a porcelain infant. And rinse with lukewarm water like it's a religious rite. You may not have much, but by Queen Victoria's dainty lace cuffs, you will have immaculate fake teeth. Now, a new question emerges. What if you hadn't gotten dentures? What if your dental journey hadn't been as linear? Not everyone had the money for a good set of chompers, after all. And so your imagination drifts again. You picture a friend of yours, let's call him Ned, who has only 6 real teeth left. 4 in the front, 2 in the back, and an absolute disaster in between. Ned doesn't bother with dentures. Instead, he's got a home remedy and a strong jawline. He chews only on the left side. He drinks everything through a tin straw. He has mastered the tight-lipped smile. Mainstream fact: many working-class Victorians simply lived without most of their teeth. It was easier to adapt than to pay for repairs. Soft foods, mashed vegetables, and thick broths were dietary staples. not just because of tradition but because it hurt too much to eat anything else. You and Ned sit on a public bench one foggy morning, sharing a tin cup of tea and some bread that's been boiled into submission. He laughs at your porcelain. He calls it stage teeth. He bets you paid more for them than you did for your boots. He's probably right. Fringe tidbit: there were even mail-ordered dentures available by the end of the century. One size fits most, they claimed. Conveniently skipping over the part where everyone's mouth is shaped like a chaotic snowflake. Imagine stuffing a prefab horseshoe into your jaw and hoping for the best. Many did. You lean back and watch the streets. A woman walks by, her cheeks slightly sunken, mouth pursed in a permanent line. You wonder if she's lost her teeth too, or maybe never had the chance to keep them in the first place. There's a sort of secret club among the toothless. You can see it in the way they nod to each other, the way they laugh through closed lips, the way soup becomes not just food, but a love language. Historians still argue whether toothlessness among the working poor was seen as a badge of survival or a mark of shame. Some accounts suggest it was just the price of getting older. Others hint at quiet embarrassment, especially for women, but the reality was this: if you lived long enough, and ate hard bread often enough, you were going to lose a few. Back at your flat, you prepare a meal that requires no chewing. Stewed carrots, creamed peas, a soft, gelatinous meat pudding you're not entirely sure qualifies as food. But it's warm, and it doesn't bite back. And that's enough. You remove your dentures before eating. It's easier that way. You're not trying to impress anyone tonight. Later, you take a walk. The fog has settled low over the cobbles, curling around lampposts and storefronts like a sleepy cat. Somewhere, a music hall is letting out laughter and piano notes drifting through the mist. You pass a window and catch your reflection. Without your teeth in, your mouth sinks in just a little. Not unattractive, just softer, more human, less armor, more truth. And you realize something. You're not your teeth. You're not your fillings, your molars, or your clever little porcelain pretenders. You're not the cloves you crushed or the vinegar you swished. You're not the dentist's ledger or the barber's forceps. You're just you. And that's enough. You slip your hands into your coat pockets and keep walking, head tilted back slightly to feel the moisture of the fog against your cheeks. Around the corner, you spot a familiar sign, an apothecary you've passed a dozen times but never entered. On a whim, you step inside. The shop is quiet, lit by oil lamps that flicker against rows of dark wood shelves. Everything smells like thyme and camphor and distant libraries. You browse until your eyes land on a small glass bottle labeled simply, "Tooth Drops, for comfort and clarity." You have no idea what's in it. You buy it anyway. Back home, you unscrew the cap. It smells like mint and regret. You dab a little on your gums and feel the cool, sharp tingle spread like tiny whispers across your mouth. You're not sure if it helps, but it feels like it might. And sometimes, in a world where pain lurks behind every bite, feeling like something works is worth the penny. You sit by your window, looking out over the rooftops. Somewhere, a dog barks, a train rumbles in the distance, a child sings a tune you can't quite place. And you, with your tired jaw and borrowed smile, let the evening fold around you. You're not broken, you're evolving. And though the days of natural teeth are behind you, you've found a rhythm, a way to exist in this strange, creaky, clove-scented century. Toothless, maybe, but not helpless. And certainly not done. Another morning, another rinse. You stand at your basin, swirling tepid water and watching yesterday's minty remnants swirl down the drain. Your dentures rest beside you, floating serenely in their porcelain bowl like a ship between voyages. You lift them gently, the bottom plate still squeaks when you press it in, but you've come to see that as part of the ritual. As you adjust your teeth in front of the mirror, you begin to wonder, what did people really believe about their teeth in Victorian times? Beyond pain and practicality, what were the deeper ideas? The stranger myths, the cultural baggage carried between each bite. Mainstream fact: Victorians associated good teeth with morality and character. White, straight, and complete teeth weren't just a sign of wealth, they were thought to reflect purity, discipline, and even virtue. A crooked smile, that wasn't just dental, it was moral decay. This belief trickled down to children. Parents were advised to instill dental discipline early, though not always effectively. Tooth brushing was encouraged, yes, but only among those who could afford a brush, paste, and the time to supervise it. For the rest, it was prayer and porridge. Now, you wander outside again. There's something almost meditative about walking post-breakfast. Teeth snug and polished, lips sealed against the wind. You pass a bakery and inhale deeply, warm bread, cinnamon, the faint tang of something overproofed. You don't dare bite into anything crusty, but the scent is enough. And here, your thoughts drift to something stranger. Fringe tidbit: some Victorians believed that dental pain could be caused by emotional unrest or even tooth demons. It wasn't uncommon to hear folk tales in rural communities about spirits that settled in teeth to punish gossip, gluttony, or deceit. You imagine one now, an angry little goblin hammering away at a molar because you once said something rude at a tea party. You chuckle softly, which makes your dentures click. You reach a bench and sit, noticing an old pamphlet someone's left behind. The edges are browned, the print slightly faded. It's titled Secrets of the Mouth, a guide to the spiritual cleanliness of teeth. You skim it, curious. Lines jump out like confessions. He who neglecteth his gums surely neglecteth his soul. The devil thrives in unflossed caverns. Only the upright man smiles with courage. Historians still argue whether these writings were satire or sincere. Some scholars think they were part of the moral hygiene movement, where personal cleanliness was tied tightly to spiritual virtue. Others argue they were propaganda used to sell expensive brushes and powders under the guise of holiness. Either way, it makes you slightly more grateful for your quiet morning rinse. You lean back on the bench and let the sun warm your face. For a moment, the aches seem distant. The burden of all that brushing, rinsing, and discomfort feels like a strange dream someone else had. And then, a memory returns. The child you once were, staring into your grandmother's cracked mirror, mouth open wide, poking at a loose tooth with fingers that hadn't yet known fear. You remember the taste of blood and pennies, the way the tooth finally gave way, soft and sudden, the thrill of absence. Tooth loss meant something different back then. It was a rite of passage, a secret milestone, the thrill of a new coin under your pillow and the promise of bigger teeth ahead. You wonder when that changed. When did losing a tooth stop being magical and start being mildly terrifying? You shake the thought away. The answer doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here, fully equipped, battle-worn, maybe, but functioning. You glance around the park. A child skips by, clutching an apple. He takes a loud, confident bite. You wince instinctively, even though it's not your tooth anymore. You watch as he runs off, and something inside you softens. You're not envious, just nostalgic. You rise and continue walking. Your steps are slow, but sure. Your teeth are quiet now. No squeaks, no slippage. Maybe today's the day they finally fit just right. At the market, you buy a small jar of honey and a loaf of soft brown bread. You nod politely at the seller, who doesn't know the journey your mouth has taken just to enjoy this simple transaction. You return home, slice the bread carefully, drizzle honey across its surface, and take the gentlest of bites. It's perfect. Not just in taste, but in experience. The bread yields, the honey sings, and your teeth, you're ridiculous. rattling, foreign-made smile. Do exactly what they were meant to do. No pain, no panic, just food and silence and the tiniest flicker of joy. You close your eyes and let the flavors linger. Later that night, you settle into bed and think about everything your mouth has endured: the burnt breadcrumbs, the vinegar, the tobacco rubs, the clove oil, the extractions, the whispers of demons, the hollowed-out ivory, the rattling porcelain. And you smile, because somehow, against all odds, you're still chewing, still sipping, still smiling. And maybe, just maybe, you're beginning to enjoy it. Your bedroom is quiet now. The fire has faded to glowing coals, and the air is cool enough to pull the blanket just a little tighter around your shoulders. On the nightstand, your dentures rest once again in their porcelain bowl, soaking like tiny ships after a long voyage. You glance at them with something like affection. Funny, isn't it, the way you've come to see them not just as tools, but companions. These molded bits of porcelain have been through everything with you: breakfasts and toothaches, laughter and clove oil, the ups and downs of Victorian dental warfare. You sigh, not from weariness, but from a kind of mellow satisfaction. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. The morning rinse, the precise alignment, the mental inventory of sore spots. But tonight, you're simply grateful for how far your mouth has come. Mainstream fact: by the late Victorian era, the science of dentistry was finally gaining legitimacy. The Royal College of Surgeons began issuing licenses to qualified dental practitioners. Official textbooks were published. Dental chairs became more than just barbers' stools with armrests. It was slow progress, but it was real. You imagine stepping into one of these newer, cleaner dental offices, with polished brass fixtures and an actual waiting room. No sheep shears, no pipe smoke, just gleaming tools and antiseptic smells. A Victorian dream come true. And yet, you can't help but miss the absurdity just a little. Fringe tidbit: in some parts of rural England, even into the 1890s, people still believed that rubbing one's teeth with crushed emerald dust could prevent tooth rot. Of course, it didn't, but crushed emeralds felt luxurious. And the placebo effect is a powerful thing when you're desperate to save your smile. Historians still argue whether dental care in the Victorian age improved the population's overall health or merely extended the agony of poor hygiene with more expensive treatments. Some suggest that widespread access to sugar and flour made tooth decay inevitable, no matter how advanced the brushes became. Others believe education and cleanliness began turning the tide. But tonight, you don't need to solve that. You just lie there, gazing up at the ceiling, letting your mind drift gently over every strange, delightful moment you've explored. You remember the crocodile dung toothpaste, the burnt breadcrumbs, the minty regret of homemade tooth tinctures. You picture yourself in a scratchy chair, your head tilted back, staring into the worried eyes of a man who sells fish by day and extracts molars by moonlight. And you smile again, bare gums and all. Because this journey wasn't just about teeth. It was about people, the bizarre things they believed, the desperate solutions they tried, the way they kept chewing, no matter what the century threw at them. You think of old Ned with his 6 remaining teeth and iron will. Of the woman in the market who refused to stop smiling, despite a mouth full of gaps. Of the child with the apple, biting with fearless abandon. You think of yourself. And for the first time in a long time, your mouth doesn't feel like something broken, or missing, or artificial. It feels like a story. One that stretches from the soot-stained streets of London to the quiet corner of your room, where firelight flickers against the porcelain and your breathing begins to slow. You close your eyes. And now, slowly, softly, we fade into the final wind down. Let your body grow heavier now. Sink a little deeper into the mattress. Let the quilt fold gently over your chest like the closing of an old book. The kind with linen pages and gold trim. the kind that smells faintly of peppermints and history. Your jaw unclenches. There's nothing left to chew tonight. No more tooth dust, no more burnt breadcrumbs, just stillness, and the whisper of the past. You've walked the cobbled alleys of Victorian life. You've endured tobacco rubs, vinegar rinses, and barbers with bloody aprons. You've watched as ivory became porcelain, and superstition became science. You've soaked your gums in clove oil and faced down dental demons with sleepy defiance. Now, the noise is gone, the world grows distant. You are not your pain. You are not your past. You are the sum of your stories, and tonight, that story has come to rest. Let the fog roll in, soft and silver, around the edges of your mind. Let the flicker of lamplight fade to stars. Let your breath slow. Let your dreams unfold, gentle and strange. In this silence, your body repairs. In this calm, your thoughts dissolve. The journey is done. The teeth are clean. The story has been told. And you are so very tired. Sleep now. Sleep well. Sleep long.